Being poorly educated and on welfare really puts you at the bottom of society, doesn't it? The contemptuous look in my ex-wife Emily's eyes as she said those words to me. The young man laughing beside her must be her affair partner. At that moment, I lost all my affection for her. Who are you confusing me with? When I said that coldly, Emily replied with a puzzled huh. Ignoring that, I slipped past the two of them and left. Wait a minute. Her call to stop me didn't reach my heart. All I felt was annoyance. My name is Michael, and I'm 42 years old. Currently, I'm unemployed due to certain circumstances, and I've been single since my divorce 3 years ago. Some might think my situation looks lonely, but I don't feel that way at all. I don't regret getting divorced, and thanks to some unique family circumstances, I'm used to living alone, so I don't feel like my current situation is anything special. No matter the circumstances, as long as you find value in your own life, that's all that matters. Though I'm unemployed, I'm not cooped up at home, and I don't believe that work is just about earning a salary. These days, most people work for money, but the most important aspect of working should be personal growth through the experience. No matter how high the salary, if there's no growth in the job, your spirit remains impoverished. The most important things in this world are definitely not money. Some might call it an idealistic view, but this is something I'll never waver on. Right now, I'm focusing on personal growth for volunteer work, leading a fulfilling life with meaningful connections, even as a single man. Unfortunately, I couldn't truly connect with my wife, who was supposed to be my life partner. Her name was Emily. We met at work, where I was a car salesman, and she, 7 years my junior, worked as an office clerk. We dated for a year after meeting at the dealership and then got married, but the breakdown came quickly. Right after we got married, I discovered Emily was having an affair. Worse still, it was with my boss at the time, the sales manager James. I had been indebted to him since my early days at the company and had deep trust in him as a superior. So when I found out, I was devastated to the point of feeling torn apart. Soon after, I fell from the mental shock and couldn't continue working. Having lost my wife, job, and a trusted superior, I fell into a deep mistrust of people. The emotional scars were deep, and I often panicked in public, requiring frequent hospital visits for a while. It took about 3 years on welfare before I could lead a normal life again. During that time, something amazing happened to me, but I'll save that story for another time. Despite the terrible betrayal I faced, I still don't hate Emily. The same goes for James. It's painful, but I married her because I loved her, and even after the betrayal, I believe it has led to me becoming stronger. Maybe it was better to part ways after hurting each other than to stay together. To Emily, it might have just been youthful indiscretion. She was nonchalant even when our divorce over the affair came to light. Perhaps she's always been the type to take marriage and divorce lightly. Now, I even think that her free-spirited nature was one of her charms. The one consolation was that she did marry James and they had a child together. Unlike me, who grew up as an orphan, James is well-educated and capable, a reliable person. Compared to me, anyone would want to marry him. When the affair came to light, James sincerely apologized to me. He said he was prepared to be hated for life and offered any amount of alimony, asking me to claim it. James truly loved Emily. Suppressing my pain, I told him that I didn't care about the alimony, but when the child was born, to please ensure their happiness. I'll never forget the complex expression on his face at that time, a mix of joy, anger, sorrow, and pleasure. After such a tragedy, I somehow managed to recover and started volunteering. Specifically, I help run a children's cafeteria. We provide free meals to children who can get proper meals due to their families' financial situations. As a child, I was separated from my parents and shuffled between relatives' homes. But the hardest part was not being able to eat my fill during my growth years. Being a boarder made me overly cautious, so I couldn't ask for seconds. Initially, I got involved with the children's cafeteria, wanting to help my younger self, but now I see it in a broader perspective. Saving these children is like creating the future of humanity. Thanks to our volunteers' sincere efforts, many restaurants have joined a cause, even high-end ones that are usually inaccessible to most people, lending us their spaces. During one such occasion, I unexpectedly ran into Emily at a high-end Italian restaurant. It was after a meeting at the restaurant. And there she was, walking in with an unfamiliar man, bumping into me unexpectedly. The man with Emily was young and in flashy clothes, leaving me at a loss for words. Without any sign of remorse, Emily cheerfully greeted me. "Oh, long time no see. Why are you in such an upscale place? I heard you quit your job, got sick, and ended up on welfare," she asked. I could smell alcohol on Emily. Was she drinking in the middle of the day? As I stood there stunned and silent, the young man chimed in. "There are people who come to high-end places even on welfare, Emily." Indeed, recent news had been rife with issues of welfare fraud, with reports of some people living it up without working. Worried about being misunderstood, I replied, "I'm not on it anymore," but Emily laughed in a high-pitched tone. Then, with an air of superiority, she said, "This guy has no parents and didn't even go to high school," adding, "Poorly educated and being on welfare really puts you at the bottom of society, doesn't it?" The young man's expression stiffened for a moment, but he quickly laughed along, saying, "That's right, Emily." I was so dumbfounded by the absurdity that I forgot to be angry. Despite having a person like James, she was flirting with this young man. What was she thinking? And isn't her child still young? However, I had no interest in delving into Emily's family situation there. "Who are you confusing me with?" I asked Emily back. It was because the employees were watching us. I didn't want the people from this restaurant, who would be participating in the children's cafeteria, to think I was associated with Emily, so I decided to act as if she was a complete stranger. Then Emily made a face like, "What? I don't know who you are, but perhaps you've mistaken me for someone else." I brushed past the two of them, saying just that. "Hey, are you ignoring me?" Emily shouted after me. "Let it go, Emily. Forget about that guy," the young man tried to soothe her. To me, all of it was just unwanted noise. Any affection I might have had for Emily had completely vanished from my heart. I have few memories of my parents, but one phrase my mother often said sticks in my mind. It was a bleak statement devoid of dreams or hope. "Happiness is nothing but an illusion." I only have a vague memory of my father. I'm not even sure if he was my real father. My relatives didn't tell me much, but I learned that my mother used to work in a nightclub and married a man she met there. However, the marriage didn't work out, and my father left home. For a while, it was just my mother and me, but I can say I felt happy. Probably because my mother herself wasn't happy. Then one night, she went out to work and never came back. The truth was that she had run off with another man, but my relatives told me she was hospitalized for an illness. Since they wouldn't tell me the hospital's name, I went around the city asking for my mother by name at various hospitals. Of course, I never found her, and I started to think that maybe my mother was no longer in this world. Eventually, I had to give up and cut off my feelings for my mother as a way to cope. I'm grateful to the uncle and aunt who took care of me. Since they didn't have children of their own, they treated me with great care and kindness. But feeling too self-conscious, I left their home after graduating from middle school. They tried to stop me from leaving, worried about me, but I ended up leaving and started working in newspaper delivery, living on the job. Of course, being a minor, I needed a guardian's permission to work, so legally, I still relied on my uncle and aunt. But I always wanted to grow up and live on my own. As a child, I didn't want to be taken care of by adults, but for other children, I hope they can receive adult care. I want to spread this children's cafeteria project worldwide. After reuniting with Emily, I was worried about their child. It's hard to imagine Emily providing proper parenting. Despite feeling it might be meddlesome, I decided to contact James. I worried he might not answer my call, but he spoke to me with the same voice as before. I sensed a bit of tiredness in his voice, probably busy with parenting and work. I broached the subject, asking, "How old is your child now?" James hesitated for a moment, then said, 4 years old, but we're not together anymore. I was at a loss for words. But he bravely said, "Emily and I are divorced. It's been a year already," with a laugh. According to him, Emily's parents are raising the child. Apparently, Emily wasn't suited for parenting and started working soon after giving birth, leaving the child's care to her parents. She never took care of the child, not even visiting on her days off. Despite James's love for their child and his desire to live together as a family, Emily refused. Eventually, she asked for a divorce, and James became just a source of child support. It was heartbreaking that James still loved Emily, despite everything. I hung up the phone with mixed feelings. Then, suddenly, I received a call from Emily, almost dropping the phone in surprise. I hadn't expected her to keep my number. Hesitantly answering, I could hear the noisy background on her end. Got through. Connected with my ex-husband. Still clinging to my number, right? Emily said upon hearing my voice. I almost retorted that it was mutual, but for Emily, keeping my number might have been just another tool she could use someday. Emily, sounding drunk, started talking. "I heard from that Italian restaurant manager we met the other day that you're doing volunteer work." I replied, "That's right. And you're funding the organization with a significant amount, aren't you?" The manager praised you as a remarkable person. Despite being on welfare before, where did you get such money? Laughter echoed in the background. Or are you using the welfare money for volunteer work to feel superior? What's the fun in a pathetic person saving other pathetic people? I wanted to say that she was the one creating those pathetic people. But I restrained my rising anger. Anger solves nothing. Due to circumstances, I inherited a substantial estate. I wanted to use it for society. So I started the cafeteria for children who can't have homemade meals. Emily, you should bring your child sometime. With that, I ended the call. The news of my father's inheritance came to me last year. Having no parents, I never expected any inheritance. But it turned out my father, whom I barely remembered, did exist and was quite wealthy. I was told I would inherit about $20 million, including life insurance. Even hearing such a large sum, it doesn't quite register for me, just an ordinary person. Naturally, since I barely grasped the concept of having a father. But if it was true, I had to accept it. With that money, I could save many children. That thought led me to volunteer. Though my distrust in people had diminished, I didn't have the courage to marry again, so I wouldn't have children of my own. That's why I thought I could treat all children equally. And that includes Emily's child. A few days after the phone call, Emily brought her child to the children's cafeteria event at the Italian restaurant. The boy, not yet in elementary school, had features resembling Emily's, making for a handsome face. He had Emily's looks, but his demeanor reminded me of James. It might be odd to say, but thanks to not being raised by Emily, he was a well-mannered child who knew how to greet properly. Emily, knowing about my wealth, seemed to have a change of heart. "I'm sorry for what I said last time. I've actually been thinking about you all this time." I doubted her words, but I honestly admitted that I still had feelings for Emily after we parted. I can't lie about my feelings. So, can we start over? She said, her eyes shining. Wrinkles had formed at the corners of her eyes, now past 35. But seeing you with that young person, I just didn't care anymore. The lady I loved was the one married to James. Emily then raised her voice. You're just pretending to be strong. You're lonely. Everyone in the restaurant turned to look at us. Apologizing to the startled diners, I took her outside. You're a mother. How can you act like this in front of your child? I reproached her without thinking. But Emily retorted nonchalantly. You can't stand women like your mother, right? You pretend to be all about justice, but you are just a petty person holding on to the past. As much as I was angered by her words, I had to admit she might be right. Perhaps I saw my mother in Emily. I still remember how it felt to be abandoned by my mother. It was sad, painful, and frustrating. I had always wanted to marry someone I loved and build a warm family. But the person I fell for was Emily, who resembled my mother. I truly loved you, but I've woken up. There will never be an us again. However, I do want your child to keep coming to the children's cafeteria. Then, she snorted disdainfully with a humph and returned to the restaurant. My mother's words, happiness is an illusion, came back vividly, but I quickly dismissed them. Happiness isn't an illusion. If you find value in life, you can feel happiness as tangible as anything. I want to convey that to children from difficult family situations for meals. That was the last time I saw Emily. She suddenly disappeared. It seems she ran away with that young man. It turns out he was working in a bar, accused of stealing from the bar and fleeing. As someone associated with Emily, I was questioned but had nothing to share. Only the man was caught, but Emily's whereabouts remained unknown for months. According to the man, they had a falling out while fleeing with the stolen money, and Emily got out of the car in the mountains. Based on that testimony, a search was conducted, and Emily was found at the bottom of a ravine, her body drastically altered. It's presumed that she likely slipped and fell off a cliff. While Emily's fate saddened me, I was more concerned about the child she left behind. He would end up parentless, like me. However, contrary to my worries, James took custody of the child. When I told him about the children's cafeteria, he brought his child along. It was a chance to catch up with James after a long time. Though we had worked together, we never discussed our personal lives. James shared that he had a tough childhood due to his parents' divorce. Yet, he felt ashamed for how things turned out, considering himself a failed father. There's no way that's true. I think you're a great father. I can tell just by looking at your son's face. He had the look of someone who loves his dad very much. When I said that, James gave a bashful smile. He then said he's dedicating his life to his son from now on. People who find value in their lives are strong. I'm sure he'll do a splendid job raising his son. And I can't help but hope that his son will one day build a happy family of his own. The children's cafeteria's reputation spread rapidly nationwide. With people starting to make donations, I established a foundation. My call to action reached many, and the number of volunteers continued to grow. In 5, 10, 20 years, the children who grew up with the cafeteria will become adults. Watching them grow was the greatest happiness I could ask for. I can only be grateful to my parents for bringing me into this world to find this happiness. But life is finite. Or rather, it's because life is finite that it has value. Now, I sincerely hope that this work will be continued by kind-hearted people even after I'm gone.